Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the Late Mac Gamer. This is where I explore and review games that have been out for some time, since I missed out on a lot of them while playing MMOs for the last 20 years. And to make things more interesting, I also got rid of my PC machine and switched to a MacBook Pro. Crazy, right?
You're crazy, you know that.
But let's find out what games we can still enjoy and what we think of them. Jedi Fallen Order. I'll be honest with you. This game and I didn't have much in common at first. I had never played anything close to a Soul-like game before, and I was never really into the Star Wars lore. So this game had a lot to prove to me. But why even bother then, you ask? Well, after years of MMOs that became more and more easy and boring, I got tired of the lack of meaningful gameplay. And I realized that without challenge, there is no fun. So I decided to try some new genres that I had never experienced before, such as roguelikes and Souls-likes. And also, I had just watched the series Andor, which was actually the first time a Star Wars show made me care and feel anything at all. So there I was, ready to give Jedi Fallen Order a chance. Armed with my trusty DualSense controller, a reliable Ethernet cable, and my subscription to Geforce Now, I stepped into the Star Wars universe as Cal Kestis, young Jedi on the run from the Empire. Okay, so let me cut to the chase. I think this game is a better Star Wars product than almost anything else from the franchise. And how can I say that when I just admitted I only really watched Andor before playing this game?
I knew it.
Well, because after beating it, I went back and watched in order, chronological, not release, every single movie and some of the series like The Clone Wars, Obi-Wan, and The Mandalorian. Before you start trashing me in the comments, here is my argument. To me, it seems like the Star Wars universe has two main elements: the power fantasy of the Jedi Knights and the world. Now, in most Star Wars shows, both those elements are very underwhelming. The world is totally bland and lacks depth, motivations, cultures, and shades of grey. That's where Andor really stands out. As for the first time ever, the Star Wars universe is truly rich, immersive, and complex. Jedi Fallen Order does that better than the movies too, but not as well as Andor. But we'll get to that.
A path forward.
The power fantasy is just okay in all of the pew-pew laser movies and shows, with maybe a few exceptions from Obi-Wan, where they go hard on the Force. I'll give credit to the original trilogy that had a lot of spectacle and groundbreaking visual effects, especially for the time. But the Force... This is what the Force is in Jedi Fallen Order. There you go.
There you go. There you go.
Here's the Force, this thing that the most powerful characters in the galaxy want to get their hands on. Now it makes sense. Now I understand. Of course, this is very subjective, and I'm sure many people have felt the power fantasy of Star Wars in many of its products. But I never did. I grew up with Spider-Man and X-Men as a kid. There was power fantasy. And here it is in this game. Alright, so power fantasy, check. But what about the world building then? How is it better than the movies? To answer this question, I have to cover some points and then discuss the overall presentation of the game. It's not a simple question, but many elements create a picture like an impressionist painting. Here's this painting. Alien facial expressions,
Feel the oppression,
slang and dialogue,
subcultures,
and perspective, ancient history, personal and cultural trauma.
I was once a Jedi.
So it's a lot of things and not one big thing. Of course, some of those elements are also present in the movies or the TV shows, but a video game gives you more time with them and makes you feel more involved. Any of these elements, paced well for the player, will build the world and make you feel like Star Wars is real and not just a backdrop. If you haven't watched Andor and you like Star Wars, well, maybe you should or maybe you shouldn't, I don't know. It's different, but it explores people's motivation on both sides of the conflict. And I think it makes Star Wars better. Jedi Fallen Order doesn't go that deep, obviously, but it goes deeper than most of other Star Wars products. For all of those reasons, from the impactful mythos to the complex world, I see Jedi Fallen Order as a product aligned with some of the best Star Wars has to offer. Now that I've shared how I see this game in relation to Star Wars, let's look at some of my impression of the game itself. Let me start by saying this. I have never played such a blockbuster video game. It might not be a big deal for some of you, but after years of playing MMOs that have limited graphics and gameplay options, I was amazed. The first part of the game, which serves as a tutorial, plunges you right into the action. You have to do some platforming with amazing camera angles that create different effects, intimacy, spectacle, and adrenaline. When I finished this introduction, I felt breathless and hooked. Sadly, I had to wait a bit more before experiencing more of those awesome moments, as they introduce you to other aspects of the gameplay and the systems. But I was so happy to see them return regularly throughout the game for some epic action scenes and pure Star Wars fun. Jedi Fallen Order also does something very refreshing. It adds to the visual creativity of the Star Wars universe. Through clever use of special moments like meditation, flashbacks, and visions, the developers managed to balance respect for the established visual style with some more artistic and trippy visuals. These moments do not feel out of place at all because they are well done and fit the universe well. But they are a nice change of pace and provide more visual diversity to a franchise that honestly has been overused throughout the years. Another example is how they use music, sticking with orchestral pieces that Star Wars is known for, but also mixing in different styles here and there. They even introduce a plot and gameplay element through musical cues, like Cal's ability to see the past through the Force.
That song, I wrote it years ago.
It's just brilliant and such a nice touch. There is a lot to unpack here. The game has challenging combat inspired by Souls-like games, platforming, puzzles, skills upgrades, and Metroidvania elements. I won't go into details about every of those aspects here, but I want to share how it felt for someone who is new to this genre. So, I had just finished Hades when I started Jedi Fallen Order. Video coming soon. So I was already used to dying a lot more than in my MMOs days. But I have to admit that I got frustrated a few times. I played on Jedi Master difficulty all of the way, and some fights, enemies or bosses were really tough and made me try hard. It was obviously very satisfying when I beat them, but I sometimes wished I could change something to try a different approach. There is no loadout, no specialization or weapon diversity. I just had to get better or stop playing. Maybe that's a hallmark of Souls-like, but it didn't seem like good design to me at the time. However, this was quickly forgotten thanks to the cool power fantasy skills and upgrades that I could unlock throughout the game, and the smart pacing between combat, exploring with various traversal mechanics, and puzzle solving. All of this was enhanced by the ability to revisit previous areas and find new secrets with new abilities, Metroidvania style. Some of my favorites were of course the push ability, which had fun puzzles and let me throw annoying enemies into the abyss, the capacity to hack other droid enemies with BD and make them fight for me, and going back to old zones to dive into the water and discover hidden treasures. With all of that, it is not really a surprise that the game keeps you engaged for hours and hours, and every time the gameplay loop could become a little stale, a little discouraging or repetitive, boom! New planet, new unlocks, new powers, or sword combos. The motivation line is on a tight rope here, designed expertly throughout the game. Speaking of endgame, there is an old French expression, quand il y en a plus, il y en a encore, made famous by the singer-songwriter Stromae. When there is no more, there is still more. And that's what you get with Jedi Fallen Order. New Game Plus mode, the option to continue your playthrough and collect all of the cosmetic stuff, and the challenge mode with waves of enemies that will totally kick your butt. Hours and hours of extra gameplay that celebrate combat and/or exploration and let you replay the game with a twist. It's a well-designed and generous offer to keep the game fun and engaging. It makes Jedi Fallen Order a perfect game to come back to once in a while and realize you have forgotten all of the timing and combos. That's awesome.
Break's over. On it. All right, again. Take him out. Can't hit him. I'm not.
Alright, so the video is already getting long, and for the two weirdos that are still watching, I just wanted to talk briefly about the story without spoiling any of the major plot points. I thought the story was decent, sometimes even quite good, but not very memorable or emotional. The idea of playing as Cal, a young Jedi on the run from the Empire, is interesting. The game does a better job with that than the first episode of Obi-Wan ever did, for example. Most of the characters in the story are well written, with side characters being more endearing. But I think animation plays a big role in that. Unfortunately, Cal, the main character, suffers from bland animation and facial rendering compared to other characters, human or otherwise. Look at this scene with Night Sister Merrin, looking shockingly good. And on the next shot, Cal looks like a box of cereals. It makes it hard to connect with him, really.
What do you think, BD? I agree.
Some of the strong points, though, are the lore elements we get from the ancient Zephyr ruins, which are not very explored in the Star Wars canon. The world building we get from the NPCs and extra dialogues, and Cal's relationship with the Force, which reminded me of how Luke learned and trained with the Force in The Empire Strikes Back. By the way, that's a common narrative device used in every sport team / Christmas feel-good movies out there. Nothing too fancy here. There are also some surprising side characters with more complex motivation, like Siri, Merrin, Tyron Malicos, Grease, and Prof, who bring some depth to the story. But generally, to me, the narrative value of Jedi Fallen Order is how well it sits within the general Star Wars universe. Its franchise continuity with returning characters such as Saw Gerrera and Darth Vader. The story framing with a character escaping the infamous Order 66 and how well it expands on its lore with the Zephos and the visit to Dothamir, the homeworld of the Night Sisters. Before I wrap up this video on Jedi Fallen Order, I wanted to make sure that I finish on a sour note. We already talked about Cal's distracting facial animation that makes it hard to connect with him, and the difficulty curve that can frustrate some players with its get good or give up attitude. But what we didn't talk about is the limited and disappointing exploration systems. Sometimes you get something nice for exploring, like a cosmetic item or an HP boost. But other times it's just a waste and you hit invisible walls everywhere that break your immersion totally. That's not super fun. And then finally I could call these next things bloat systems. Systems that are there but don't do much except make the game artificially longer and bigger than it really is. In this list, I would put the plant seeds you find on planets that grow into little plants on your ship, but then nothing else at all. The lightsaber crafting table, where you can change some cosmetic parts that you can barely see when you actually play. The 20 colors of the same poncho, the colors of BD or your ship. The RPG-style dialogues options that have no impact whatsoever on the story. And I would even argue the skill tree, that is just a pacing tool as you eventually unlock everything with no limits or choices. All those things fall short very fast, and if only half of them had been implemented, but with more depth and consequences, I think the game would have been better for it. But Jedi Fallen Order has been a blast. I learned the value of persistence and the timing of parry. I enjoyed, for the first time, the power fantasy of being a Jedi. And in my 30 hours or so with the game, I witnessed a stunning display of action and spectacle that felt very unique and artistic. I would even say now that I'm a Star Wars enthusiast, finally. I genuinely appreciate all the effort and passion that Respawn Entertainment put into this game, and I cannot wait to play the sequel Jedi Survivor. But since I am the late Mac gamer, I will probably get to it in a year or two when it's no longer relevant and it maybe gets ported on Macs. Just kidding. But that's me, and who cares what I think? So what do you think? Have you played it? What did you like and dislike about it? I make these videos to share my love for video games and talk with people about them, so please feel free to leave a comment and we'll chat. This was the Late Mac Gamer. If you liked it, like it. If you want more, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
See you next time, sweet pea.